gonna start recording. Alrighty, welcome everyone to a little bit of a revamp of the Fellas podcast after a few month hiatus. We
The only
have
ever gigantic podcast.
only ever we have our guest today, Mr. Hiatus Thor. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here, kicking it back to Gigantic or Go Gigantic. It's always great to go back into the past. Jack G and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about the past, dredge up some things, and I guess in some ways get the record straight because it's been so long. But absolute privilege and pleasure to be here to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, which was Gigantic.
Oh, no problem. It's super exciting to talk to you, honestly. So the first thing I want to ask is, what exactly was your role in developing Gigantic?
Woo! So, wow. Back in 2014, EA had I don't want to tell too long of a story, but EA had
Tell as long as of a story you want. We have
shit and wild religion. Uh, the EA had actually stopped developing their free-to-play games, and which sounds weird now, back in 2000, like now, but it was even weirder back in 2014. They're like, there's no market for free-to-play games, so they let go of like at that time, Titanfall had done very very poorly. Sims was in like developmental hell. And their free-to-play games like Battlefield Heroes, and I was very much associated with a game called Dawngate, and at that time, way back in 2014, I was a broadcaster, but I had been known as a broadcaster to work kind of hand in hand with the developers as far as streaming and showing off the product. And I was kind of a product broadcaster. And so after that game had gotten shut down, the community director at Motiga had found me, had seen what I kind of done for Dawngate, and said, "Hey, we would love you to come over here and work on the publishing side and be community manager slash broadcast relations." And then be able to flex your role into, there's times when you do a little QA stuff because you had E3 coming up, or Tomas and I were top of the leaderboard internally, so we would be kind of hit up for like, hey, design like balance and stuff like that. But my day-to-day job was mostly creating content of the team, of the studio. In fact, Jack, you saw my old interview slash like tour of the Motiga studio. And so we had been developing a game internally, but it was kind of my job to focus that energy and that love and show it externally to the player base, keeping the community up to date on what's going on, the old dev shows, the old YouTube videos, and of course, communications. So, yeah.
Right. So what exactly was the time frame that you started working with Motiga?
So 2014, Gigantic really got announced, and that was also the year that EA had shut down their free-to-play games. And so I had started doing things right when the game got announced in alpha on a more of a broadcasting side of things.
Right.
But then like very very soon, Troy had reached out to me and said, "Hey, 2015 is the year we're really going to go ham at conventions and like do the convention route." And they had a very specific plan how they wanted to release the game. So started like dipping my toe in at 2014, the end of 2014. Got brought on full time and not contract, because in 2014 I was on contract, starting in early 2015. So yeah.
Wow. So you were quite early into it.
I was. Having said that, though, there had been a lot of developers passionately working on the game prior to that. So the programmers, designers, UX, and stuff like that. So, but I was definitely in the alpha, so to speak.
Right. How would you say was the working environment at Motiga? Did you have a good time there?
Oh, gigantic. Again, I'm sure we'll show some of the footage. I've worked now as whether I'm at high res, and I love high res. I truly, truly do. But there has been video game industry goes ups and downs, and you hear about horror stories in the video game industry. And Gigantic was a family. There was so much shenanigans that happened in the course of Gigantic's development and UWP, and I can kind of get into all that stuff. But throughout it all was the family and that feeling of we're in it together in the trenches. And I look at that picture I sent you, Jack, of the development team, and I see people there that I truly love and respect. And it was, it's so hard. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but I've seen a lot of newer developers talk about working from home and how amazing it is, and there's so many benefits of working from home. But I actually fall a little bit on the other side of the fence because I can speak to where half the studio we were on an Arc server way back then. Arc had just come out,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so the publishing team had so we split each other off into three different teams: the design team, the publishing team, and the programmers. And we would see the designers and the programmers go into a meeting, and the publishing team would all log onto Arc and destroy each other's bases. And it was just silly. It was crazy. It was like we'd have Smash Brother tournaments during the afternoon. Or we would
Mm-hmm.
have Whiskey Fridays where everybody would hang out and just be a family. And it was hard. And it was daunting. It was challenging. But I look at that picture and I see people I truly like just believe in, and it was amazing. It really was. It was wild but fun. For
That's
sure.
awesome. And I feel like in a weird way it definitely reflects in the game. Just that kind of like creativity and love, and just like very much like it was a group effort. Like this was a team effort, and I think that really showed in the end result of the game. Um but to start to get on like kind of the deeper stuff here, we
Sure.
asked this question, a similar question to SoFetch, but we're curious on your opinion on it. What do you think contributed to Gig's ultimate failure as a
Ooh.
game?
Okay, so this is super interesting. So there were a lot of extraneous factors that played into it. I would say first and foremost was UWP, which stands for Universal Windows Platform. Which again, going back in history, this looks like it shouldn't have been a very easy thing or something that just in today we take for granted. But the idea
Mm-hmm.
of playing with Xbox or playing on PC, buying a product on Steam, and then logging onto your Xbox and having that show up. None of that really infrastructure existed. And again, I was pretty far removed from the programming and day-to-day work that Ron had done. But Microsoft really kind of sold this idea that it was one connected ecosystem with Windows 10. Um, and none of that was ready. Absolute, like none of that was ready. And I remember just hearing the ranting and raving and the conversations and the fights externally and internally about how we were going to do this. So the game itself had progressed to a point where if I had to compare it to a similar game, like we were 7 patches past the launch. So you come out with a game, and then you have a season or 2 seasons planned
Mm-hmm.
afterwards.
Right.
We had content, we had skins, we had all this kind of stuff. But we could never really release the game because UWP wasn't ready. And again, part of that's on Motiga, part of that's on Microsoft. And again, I don't know where the blame lies ultimately, though. If I had to like put my chips on, I would say Microsoft. For those familiar with Lionhead Studios, the creators of Fable, they actually did a tell-all in the publication where that doomed Fable and Lionhead Studios, a huge studio out there in over in EU, and that was the same thing that doomed us in a lot of
Right.
ways. So people don't really remember that or talk to that. I have a couple horror stories. That was one huge factor. I think our MTX, our way to actually monetize the game, was
Yeah,
just
definitely.
yeah, that just wasn't. Everybody was figuring it out at that point, and I think it just took us a lot longer to figure it out. So MTX was a big one: how to monetize, how to actually make money. Hero shooters were all the rage back then. So and that it's weird because as of now, there's really only two hero shooters in the mix when it comes to like Overwatch and Paladins. Um, but Battleborn, Gigantic, Overwatch, those always, and they were trying to get those hero shooters out there. So was there an oversaturation of the market? It's possible. I do feel like Gigantic kind of stood on his shoulders. Um, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think people kind of get really black and white when it comes to when they talk about why Gigantic failed. And I feel like there's a lot more nuance than people let on,
There
where
is.
I've seen where most people talk about how they didn't monetize the game enough and how it didn't release as quickly as it should have. And although those things are true, there's a lot of factors that go behind, how quickly a game can be released, or how, because also too, it feels like Gigantic really wanted to focus on gameplay and didn't want to be pay to win, like a lot of other games started being at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And while it was also a free to play game, it was it's kind of hard to monetize a game like that while also keeping the focus on the gameplay.
I agree, and I think one of the things that I might catch a little flack here, and I fought very hard internally at the time, but I felt like Gigantic nailed the fantasy, the creatures, the aesthetics of just a wonderful world to live in. But I think one of the things that we ultimately failed on is creating characters that people could see a little of themselves in there, and cosplaying
Mm-hmm.
um, and
Yeah.
it sounds very strange, but I just actually gone to MomoCon last week, in a con in Atlanta, and everywhere I looked, there were characters and people dressing as like Jet or League of Legend characters and cosplaying these people, and they felt like a connection to these characters. And I've often heard, and where I love Voden, I love Beckett, I love Trip and stuff like that. I felt like there was a little bit less human essence in the game, and where
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was
definitely.
and I think that in a way hurt the game, where it's kind of hard, like it's kind of hard to say, oh yeah, I'm a tentacle lady, I'm gonna
Yeah.
cosplay, and there has been a cosplay of the tentacle lady, or has it
Yeah, it
been?
feels a lot more like fantasy instead of like actual human world stuff. When you're
Yeah,
comparing it to like Valorant, who is like
exactly.
where people are mostly human, or League of Legends, where there are a lot of humans, and then also like Overwatch, where mostly humans. You can see a lot of those people connecting with certain characters because of like their personality traits, their looks, etc.
And agreed. And I don't want anybody walking away from this being like, oh, Thor hates the character of Gigantic. No, I just feel like there's a balance there, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we very much leaned heavily on the anthropomorphic characters, Vodins, the robots,
The Pacos.
exactly,
Yeah.
and those are all great. But I think there needs to be an equal amount of characters to say, hey, I'm that person in another life. I
Yeah,
want to dress as the person. I want to feel
Yeah,
as that
for
person.
sure.
And
I feel
Um,
like the only characters that you could like do that with were like Beckett, Trip, or like Amani. Really.
Zenobia, maybe. Xandora, possibly.
uh,
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
It is definitely kind of a hard balance to strike because, in my opinion, I take a lot of inspiration from Gigantic in my own art. I absolutely adore this art style, and I do think it is kind of hard, yeah, to like make these characters more human, while also keeping that like fantasy creature aesthetic. Because personally, my favorite character design in the game is Mozu, and she's a little chaotic tiny gremlin. And I just can't imagine her being more human.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Your
yeah.
camera is bugging out a little there,
Oh,
by the way,
oh,
Thor.
let me see if I can't restart it. Bada bing, bada boom. Oh, nope, still green. Please, camera. Oh, it came back for a second. Hello. There
There
we
you
go.
go.
right
Yeah,
here, all good.
I'm back. And I guess finally the last thing that came, suppose that led to Gigantic's downfall is, overall the game played smoothly. The game design was amazing. Um, it it's hard because in game design now, and having kind of just seen the other competitors, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you want to press one button and have fun, and it sounds very very strange. But when I play with new players and people, and having a very easy connection to pressing the F button and finding the
Yeah.
fun. And I think
Mhm.
that's and if you play Gigantic and you love Gigantic, you'll find that fun. You'll find the combos, you find the moves,
Mm-hmm.
you find the. But Gigantic very much wove a tapestry that for some people is very hard to read, and I think we should have done a better job of kind of like making it a little bit of an open door and a higher ceiling, so to speak. I think we
Right.
nailed the higher ceiling, but I think we could have opened the door a little bit easier, and definitely pushed the genre forward as far as like crumbling architect, giant
Mm-hmm.
monsters fighting down, and there's so much there. But we've all been there when you would take a point and then you'd be like, oh, what an idiot! They summoned a dragon here when they should have done a bloomer, and nobody puts a bloomer on point B.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just learning the game for the first time. I thought this was a fun, interesting character to summon on the point, and so I think that definitely hurt the new player reception, the
Yeah.
attache rate, and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, it's and as me and Jack are both in the private server community where people are still playing this game and keeping it alive, it is definitely interesting to see people who didn't play when the game was still live being introduced by their friends and coming in and having no idea what to do, because really me and Jack have been playing this game for years at this point, but other people when they come in, it's like, what the hell is a power rotation? Like,
The
what do you mean,
tutorial,
Infernal?
even during live, the old tutorial didn't. I just feel like it didn't really help a lot. Like it explained most of the basics, but even then, it just didn't really help new players like kind of still even like understand the game to a certain degree.
For sure,
Yeah.
and getting your team to all go as once to go get the wound,
And
and
no comm system
oh,
as well.
yes, and that and so much of that was just like, okay, I want to speak to. I'm a PC player. I have a controller player playing on Xbox.
Uh-huh.
How do I speak to that person? Well, it's like we're trying to do UWP. We have to program that,
Exactly.
and none of
Yeah.
that was programmed in. And I'll just throw it back. But we had oh my gosh. Vox. So Discord wasn't even a thing back then, right?
Yeah, it was like
Right.
TeamSpeak and Spike and
Yeah, Mumble
Skype.
and all that, and so the conversations have just changed so much,
Exactly.
and so all that should have been day one stuff as far as like being able to say, hey everyone, let's go.
Yeah, especially like now in games, like most of the games that have cross-platform do have in-game voice chat.
Yes,
Is the
yes,
thing.
yes.
I remember in 2018 when I found the game initially, me and my friends were in middle school and we were screaming at each other in an Xbox party trying to figure out how to ping to the other players that were not in our party, and then absolutely flaming each other because we just couldn't figure it out.
That's funny.
And yeah, it is definitely hard to communicate with the other players, especially as a new player where you don't really know what you're trying to do. Um, and I've noticed a lot as well when people pick characters, they in the community now they like don't really have any team synergy either. Like they'll pick characters just based on like I think like I've played this character twice. I'll just stick with them, instead of like trying to pick for their team and things like that. And there's just a lot of nuance in mechanics for Gigantic as well, that can be really really hard to learn. And I'm sure that was probably one of the reasons why player retention was kind of rough. um, but that being said, that leads really well into my next question. If you could go back and change anything about the game and have it be re-released now, what would you change?
Oh man. So currently I am the so right now I have about a two-man team with a little bit of flex for Evil Mojo working on Realm Royale.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what I get to do, and I've had a pretty great history as far as working in the industry, whether it's like consultations and stuff like that. I wish I knew what I know now going back, and I wish I could have been there to help and just push the game in the right direction. I UDK, which is what the game's kind of like made on, or Unreal 3. Uh, wow, I just wish I could go back and be like and offer what I've learned.
God, hearing Unreal 3 is just so surreal.
Let me throw some things at you. So a lot of the tutorials for Unreal 3 is broken up in 8-minute chunks because back then YouTube wouldn't let you upload longer than 8 minutes, and so that's what people don't understand. So Unreal 3 is getting really long in the tooth, and there's really no easy conversion from Unreal 3 to 4. But I digress. I just wish I could go back and everything that I know now and just and try to push it in the right direction. And so I don't know. I wish I could be on the front lines. Carter was the designer, absolutely amazing. James Finney, James Finney, I liked him a lot. I remember coming in from the publishing side and try to help with balance or suggestions, and he just every day would be like, "You're an idiot." I would offer suggestions, and coming from like that.
Did you say balance suggestions or like
balance, and
this game is? I'm gonna be honest. This game is very hard to balance.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And I thought I knew it, but I just on seeing where I was there as a person 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and seeing who I am now, and of course it's not like I know everything now, but I just wish I could go back in time and just be the person the team needed me then I am now.
Yeah.
It is quite interesting to see also too how the community has stuck around after all this time. And how the private server community has kept this game on life support, basically. Even at times, there will be people who will stay in that queue for upwards of like 2 days to get a game.
That's so amazing. It really is. And then I think a lot of the developers in that picture had to corner off Gigantic and just put a hard lock on it and just
Hmm.
hide it away in their like being, because so much love went into that game, so much
Yeah.
heart went into that game. And
For
so
sure.
for me, like, this was like a Pandora's box of like, yeah, I dedicated a year and a half, almost 2 years to that game, where like I open it and I'm just like, man, I love the people, I love the game, I love the community. I look at like old posts from people, and I'm just like, man, this was special. This was special. Did it have problems? Oh yeah, it did for sure. We talked just about some of them, but the love and the passion was there, and the players definitely resonated with that for sure.
Have you played any matches in Gigantic Heaven?
I have no idea what you're referring to. Gigantic Heaven. That sounds like a really fun place if I was to do it. I would love to try it out or look at it, but as in a legal sense, I absolutely have
No,
not.
no,
I don't even know what you're
right.
talking
Sorry.
about.
Yeah, no, a
It's
spell just came over me and I started talking. I don't know.
uh, if
There's
if I
some strange words to come out of my mouth.
if I
Uh,
was, I would just bless everyone there and say you're doing the Lord's work. I love it. I love to
Uh-huh.
see it. I love to see it.
um, well, I've asked quite a few questions. Jack, do you have anything that you would like to mention?
Yeah. I want to know a little more about how you got banned from throwing things.
Yeah, so that was pretty good.
I would. I'm a little concerned, I would say.
Sure. We did the convention crawl in the year of 2000. I want to say 15, and the team had went to every single con, and it's so weird because I'll like go out and I'll still see one of the Gigantic shirts out there from like 10 years ago, all faded, and I'm like, oh my gosh, where did you get that shirt? And that went through all the conventions, and my boss. Troy Hewitt, who was director of communications, fantastic, absolutely one of my favorite people in the whole entire world, was like, hey, just go out there and film some content. And so my dumb butt went out there and was like, I just grabbed a bunch of shirts and started throwing out in the crowd. And as you saw in that thing, I just beamed this guy right in the face. Oh man,
Yeah, hold on, I will.
this guy, and the poor guy, he was just like, no, it's no big deal. And then I'm walking back feeling horrible. I hear on the loudspeaker, contractors, remember, it is illegal to throw things into the fans. We've had reports of people throwing things
Oh
into the. And I'm
no.
like, that's me. They're talking about me, baby. Let's go. Yeah,
It's
sorry.
celebration. Yeah.
And, oh man. Yep. Yeah, that was a good time. That was, I think, PAX South. I did that.
Yeah, I think around that.
Man, I
Um.
seriously wish I could have gone to any of the convention things where Gig was at.
So funny.
Also, this image is very, very nice. Of
Oh,
the
iconic.
yeah.
Yeah, that was that was my German boys and their Lederhosen. So we would go to Gamescom. Gamescom was huge. And it was fantastic. It was fun. And these guys, I'm still friends with a couple of them these days, but they would queue back in line and they would just go back and play and play and play
Uh
this
huh.
huge stage. We had shoutcasting. And these guys were all, and they would just play the whole entire day. And so I got a picture with them. It's this quick little side story. They were doing shoutcasting all day, and a bunch of show matches, and everybody were hyped. But we were taking a lunch break, and so everybody was off the stage, and they were like, "Thor, do you want some pizza?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So the pizza guy started writing everybody's names down, and they were like, "Oh, who is this for?" And I just gave him. I said, "Oh, just ask for Thor." And so the guy, an hour later, the guy comes back up to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm having a hard time," and he, had a very thick English accent. And he's like, "How can I get all these people who ordered pizza?" I was like, "Hey, jump on the mic. We're taking a break right now, and just say their names one at a time." And in a very thick German accent, he's like, "Is there a thought here? I'm looking for a thought." Like, has anybody seen a thought? And I'm like, "Oh," and my boss is like, "What is this man doing? He's screaming for thoughts." And I'm like, "No, no." And so they had taken Thor and messed up the R and wrote T.
Uh huh.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my job. This man is screaming about thoughts on a big Gamescom monitor and just like pointing at people. Are you thought? Are you a thought?" I'm like, "Oh no."
You want a GameStop thought.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of a controversy for sure.
Next, I'd like to talk about this image.
Sure. So Troy Hewitt had really kind of pioneered this idea that taking a community, and it's called the Community Coaches Program, and people who are really passionate and loving, who love Gigantic. And I think he really kind of struck something very special. And the idea here is that we take people to the conventions and who knew like the most about the game. I think it's kind of a thing in the industry where people will work on their game, and I get it. Working on a game, if you're a UI, UX, and all that kind of stuff, a lot of the times you don't have enough time to play the game, which is obviously sad. And there's a
Mhm.
whole dialogue based on that, but it didn't make sense in Troy's mind to have people who worked on the game to talk about the game that they didn't know really about. And not to say that other developers at Gigantic didn't know their game. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, but even me, somebody who like played every single day, some of these people and the coaches, they knew back, forward, front. They were passionate about it. They breathed it. They lived it. And so Troy was like, "Hey, I'm going to take these people, bring them to a convention, and we'll pay them, and we'll have a good time, and we'll take them out, and those will be the people who will talk about the game and explain the game." And we just became a family. And there's just, I look at that picture. There's Lexi in there, who's the I mentioned before, the voice of Trip, great, amazing artist. Jeannie is the one leaning against Scrump there, and yeah, it was something very special. And Troy kind of did this coaches program, and I think I learned a lot from that for sure.
Yeah, speaking of Lexi, if you want to like just talk about her or
Yeah, Lexi actually sat right behind me. An amazing artist, actually the voice of Trip, and just very much a bright light because back then,
Mhm.
Gigantic was my first full-time job in the video game industry, and she kind of took me under her wing. She sat right behind me. And when I hear Trip, I think of Lexi because, again, she was the voice of Trip, and just a great person all around. And I think I can speak kind of to every single person in the studio where, yeah, we were family, but Lexi was special. And so if anybody ever wondered, like, oh, who voices Trip, that was Lexi.
Yeah, I follow her on Twitter. I've been trying to contact her through her email, but it's been a struggle a little bit.
I
But
completely understand. Usually, developers we're just getting yelled at all the time, so
exactly.
we put stuff on mute a lot of the
Yeah.
times. Like, I can't believe you did that, and we're like, oh, I need my sanity back, so I'm gonna put this thing on
Mhm.
mute for a
We're,
while.
we're like reaching out to you, like, we promise we're not yelling at you. We just want to talk about the dead
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
For
I would
sure.
love to be able to talk to her. We actually a couple of months back got to talk to the Woo voice actor, Bennett Taylor. He's a
Okay.
amazing person. Really
Nice,
just
nice,
an all around guy.
nice. I might be able to get you in contact with some of the old, Lisa Peck.
Yeah.
The best. I hate to admit it. Tomas was like he and I battled on the internal leaderboard. And we were always against each other because the way the matchmaking worked internally was that they would take, it'd be like good person, good, and then kind of go down, always split
Mhm.
everybody up. So Tomas and I never got to play on the same team. And man, when I would tell you, people would be screaming, yelling in the studio. Joe Pickup would be like, "Fuck you!" Anyway, excuse my language. I don't know what
It's
the right
fine. No,
word
you're all
is. It'd
good.
be like, "Fuck you, Thor! Fuck you!" And like, I mean, we got heated, and it was great. Like, that's the kind of like passion and love that you need to
Mhm.
have for your game, and especially your studio. But man, you would turn right around and you'd look at somebody and you'd be like, "I'm gonna kill you!" Like, obviously in game, but I was like, I can't believe you just like styled on me like that.
That's
So
how I feel when I play gig with you, Jack.
That's not very
uh,
nice.
and it was passionate, and Tomas absolutely amazing, great artist as well, and Carter designer. So yeah, it was some wild stuff back then for sure.
Yeah, and
And
then oh no, you go ahead.
I was gonna ask, who did you enjoy playing the most?
Oh, I mean, Carter did a great job of like really nailing down Trip's feeling and movement, and just
Mhm.
absolutely the combos and the invisibility. And I'm a big guy, and then so it'd be weird. Like people are like, oh yeah, Thor's legs look just like Lord Knossos, but actually, I like Trip. I genuinely like Trip. However, Beckett does play a very I love Beckett. I love Beckett as well. So Trip and Beckett would probably be my
Wait, who
two.
did you
I am
say
a Beckett
like
and Mozu man
who did you
personally.
say nailed down like the trip
Uh,
combos?
So Carter, who's the
Mhm.
designer on the product, and so James Finney, designer, Carter was on the design team as well, and so they just absolutely nailed the feeling of just Trip and just the doing the Q and knocking somebody up and then just getting
Mhm.
that, oh, just fantastic, just getting that old
She does have a great kit.
oh, love it,
It's a lot of
absolutely
fun
love
to
it.
play.
I
Yeah.
would love to talk to that guy.
Carter, yeah, I can shoot him a message. I think we're friends on Facebook. It's been a long time, and 10 years
Yeah,
is a
it's
long time for sure.
mhm.
We're just trying to round up as many people
Yeah.
as possible
Uh-huh.
at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a picture of Carter and I on the E3 stage together,
Yeah, this one,
and
I
yeah,
think.
exactly, and that's Carter over there, very quiet, very and I don't want to say timid because that guy is absolutely huge, but he was just generally a great person. In the video game industry, I've seen a lot of like egotistical, very like shut up. I know the way to balance this character. And if there's one thing I learned as a
Mm-hmm.
designer, it's that you need to be open to not only feedback, but you need to like understand where people are coming from. And Carter was very, very good at that, and never wore his ego out. It just everybody could see he's just a great person. So that was
So
Carter.
yeah, he was the lead designer of the game, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. And then this image as well.
Yeah. So one thing we go back. You asked me how like gigantic was,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fun. It was very much. It felt like a startup. So just a quick aside, we were working. So the CEO came in. He's like, "Hey, money's getting kind of tight, and I can't ask people to come in this weekend and QA a build. We had E3 right around the corner.
Yeah.
He's like, legally, I cannot ask anybody to come in. I can't do that. However, we do need to get a build out, and we do need to work on the build. So the doors will be open this weekend. And if you want to stop by, there'll be food in the break room, and there'll be some Smash Brothers, and I think we're going to be playing some Gigantic. That's all he said. And so we all kind of looked around at each other, and then Saturday came around, and all of us kind of showed up at the studio. And we're like, wait a second, I was by nobody had talked to each other really outside of like
Mm-hmm.
your best friend at the studio or whatever. And so that was kind of the feeling of family where it's like if something had to be done. We were coming in on a Saturday, and so when I see that picture to my left of me, if I'm facing it, that was Brandon Gerke, who was a producer, and then directly below me was Dawn, who was kind of like a father figure to me, who was also a producer in the product. And yeah, it was just a bunch of people working together to try to like make something happen. And oftentimes it felt like Microsoft had their heel on our throat, and at any moment
Mm-hmm.
they could drop the product. But yeah, we were just all together, kind of like trying to get it done for sure.
Yeah, I've heard all the stories about how the devs would like still do stuff on the game without even getting paid. Is that
Yeah.
true?
So in a way, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say like that example of the E3 that I just gave you was a perfect example of the devs just showing up, and because we knew we were going to E3 the next week, and if we didn't have a build, we were in a lot of trouble. So
Yeah.
that was just one of those things. We're like, hey, we're coming in, we're getting it done. And again, it's hard, right? Because there is a work-life balance for a lot of people at the studio.
Mm-hmm.
That was also their passion. So, in the strictest sense of, I would say, yeah, in some ways they didn't get paid if they stayed until like 9 o'clock. But there'd be times where we were just hanging out the studio until like 9, 10, 11, 12, and just playing the game, hanging out, just relaxing because it was a very rare occurrence of people coming together to make something. And that picture I showed you with everybody, that
Yeah,
looks
I
like
can
a
pull that
huge
up.
that looks like a huge team, but if you look at some of the bigger studios, like that is a very small number,
Mm-hmm.
and so a lot, and that is including the publishing team as well. So you have every aspect of the Motiga arm there in that
It looks
studio.
like a yearbook class photo.
It
I'm
does.
gonna.
It was so funny. We were all joking with each other, and yeah, it was a good time there. I look at that picture, and I guess I know where kind of everybody has gone, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, the guy in the brown jacket, Balto, he passed away about 3 years
Oh.
ago, I want to say, and so. Yeah, he was a great one. He was a programmer on the product, I want to say, and so I just look at that picture. I see a lot of great people, but yeah, it was a good time. Good time. Good time.
Um, so you work for Hi-Res now.
I
Um,
do. I do. Yeah.
how did that come about?
Oh, so yeah, so the I had after Dreadnought, which is the game I went to after Gigantic, I
Mm-hmm.
went back to broadcasting and went back onto like the community side of things. And so, however, because I had some pretty large experience working with like closely with development teams because of Gigantic and Dawngate, High Res kind of brought me on as a contractor to both show off their game and help internally to be like, okay, what are we doing? What do you guys think we should do? And it just became one of those things where High Res and I were on contract and for Realm Royale. And then I started doing stuff with Ubisoft and then High Res about 2 years ago now. We're like, hey, Thor, we'd love it if you came to work with us full time. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so I just kind of turned that contract into full time and absolutely love it. And the video game industry as a whole is not doing great right now.
Yeah.
It is in a weird spot,
It's
but
in a spot. People are still making games.
it's true, and it is in some ways amazing. Some way, like, it's just every game company has gone through something in the last 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
highs and lows and all that. High Res is no exception. However, I will say I love the people over at High Res, and I look at that picture. So I don't know if you heard the name Failco. She was really a part of the
Yeah, I
Gigantic.
interviewed
Yeah.
her.
So yeah, Failco works at High Res now.
Yeah.
She does.
Awesome.
And I don't get too much interaction with her. She did DKO and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But again, I can look back and see like, oh man, great people from that
She
company at
also
High Res.
worked on that like gigantic revival, Project Stamina, as
Yes.
well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard of another game coming out that's kind of like, oh man, I can't believe I just followed them on Twitter a little while ago. Uh, but there's another game, and I can circle back that kind of had gigantic vibes. That I was like,
Revan Blade.
Revan Blade, yes, that
There
Yeah.
is
you
the
go.
game that I'm thinking of. That definitely, to me, had some gigantic vibes for
Hmm.
sure.
I still need to
I'm
play
pretty sure
Revan
one of the
Blade.
characters is named Beckett.
Nice. Oh yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I think I saw Arrow, and I don't know if it's the
Hmm.
same Arrow, but it could be. So I was laughing. I was like, man, this is some good
Oh,
gigantic
Arrow,
characters.
like the aiming guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Yeah, it's
want
the
to say
same
it's the same.
Arrow.
That's
It
funny.
is.
Yeah,
Do you
that's
know
funny.
him?
We've had interactions, kind of like
Yeah.
back and forth. Yeah, so for sure, for sure.
Yeah, Arrow's
Okay.
super cool.
And I believe Project Stamina is still going. I think they
It's under
renamed
a different
to
name, I
Omen,
believe.
right?
Yes.
I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So they're still making progress. I will be excited to see if anything comes out of that though.
Hmm.
So right now, for high res, I am project lead. I would say the best way to describe it. It's been weird because we've been flexing our
Yeah.
roles, doing different things, and so I am, I guess, EP of Realm Royale right now, and so where I'm pretty much like make sure the game is in a state. Because Realm is on Unreal 3, we are definitely in the process of saying, hey, what can we do to make Realm the best Realm it can, but understanding like, hey, no game lasts forever. Let's do some really cool stuff. Let's work. We're
Yeah.
passionate. So I love my team, and we're doing some great stuff. But I am working towards hopefully looking into what's next. What's next for High Risk? What's next for
Hmm.
Evil Mojo and all that kind of stuff. And so can't get too much into that. But currently right now doing Realm Royale stuff, which is near and dear to my heart, which also has kind of that same art style. Not that it's kind
Yeah.
of gigantic,
Not the
Yeah.
same, but it's similar.
and made on Unreal 3 though, and I just there's not a day that goes by where I'm like, man, I wish I could have made some levels for Gigantic, or do level design and all that kind of taking the experience that I know now and bringing it back to
Yeah.
Gigantic, because that would have been cool. That would have
There
been
were
really
just-
I have played quite a bit of Realm Royale. Me and my friends used to play quite a bit of it before Reborn. But Paladins as well. Oh my god,
go.
I've wasted so many hours into that game.
There it is. There it is.
So I definitely appreciate the stuff that you're doing over there at Realm Royale.
Nice. I'm just super excited to be on the forefront of technology. Unreal 5 is like the next big thing in my head,
Mhm.
where it's such a huge leap from Unreal 3 as well. But I'm just excited for the future. I just wish again we were having a conversation right now that says, what does Gigantic 2 look like in 5.0? Yeah,
That- yeah.
Oh my goodness,
That
yeah.
would have been spicy.
Could you
for sure.
imagine?
Could
Gigantic
you
in Unreal 5?
imagine? Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Just the technology alone would have
Uh-huh.
been just amazing to see it. Oh, amazing! And they really pushed.
I feel like
Yeah.
if a re-release did happen, it would just never have that same feeling as like
Yeah.
the original, you know?
Oh yeah, 100%. Not without the same people, or at least the
Mhm.
same like directors behind it for sure.
So obviously there's a lot of protos out there, like a lot of maps and ideas and just like character arts. Would you have any favorites of like the characters?
Honestly, I none that really kind of stick out
Mhm.
in my head. Beckett was really kind of my love, and I remember going back into the history. So we had Jira and Confluence. And Confluence and Jira are two tools that developers use to kind of like connect to each other,
Mhm.
do tasks, and be able to be like, hey, I'm working on I don't know, a character right now. We need to do sound. We need to do icons. We need to do all this kind of stuff. And then Jira lets everybody kind of work together, do tasks, partition off tasks, stuff like that. But Confluence was a thing where James Finney and the rest of the developers teams kind of created this backstory for Gigantic that was like
Mhm.
multiple pages, like I want to say like 8-9 pages long, and it was wild. And I know Finney and the rest of the team was very Taito was a perfect example of like, who is that? Is like, what is underneath that?
It's a
mask?
bunch of fangs.
It is a bunch of things, and so the story that I got to read was super interesting, and I would have loved to see that kind of come to fruition.
Mhm.
All of the Empire conversation,
Yeah.
And was Taito a forgotten prince? Was how did he lose his arm? And there's a lot of cool stuff there. There's a lot of really cool lore
Mm-hmm.
back there. And then also the Titan that was there was a Titan that was going to be a mecha machine, kind of like an
Yeah.
HBK.
Yes.
Yeah, that was going to be real cool. That was going to be real. I like the idea of that.
I
That had
would
like
have loved to see how the other Guardians would have been implemented.
yeah, all the turrets and all that kind of stuff looked really, really cool. And again, I'm reaching back 9 years, so it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to kind of like go back in there. But it's interesting because so much of the game had been developed where players didn't get to see it and play on it and stuff like that. And so that's why I think Gigantic's interesting because people will be like, oh, look at this concept art, or look at Roland, look at all this kind of stuff. And
Roland.
there's so much developed
Been there from
that
the start, never got released.
wild. And I honestly, my boy Roland out there, like I don't know what happened to you because
I think it was balance issues. I think it was just what like the developers were thinking of what they wanted was just too broken of a kit.
yeah,
I think that was the issue.
but yeah, it's just I've seen similar kits
Mm-hmm.
work in like Overwatch or other games, and it's interesting. I don't know why.
Our poor
Yeah.
boy got shafted.
Because he was in Raid, right? Like that was like the prototype.
Yeah. So I got to play him in 2015, not
Uh-huh.
at the younger version of Roland. There's a young version of Roland as well
Mhm.
that I got to play, and that's Grandpa Roland, and a couple different iterations.
Grandpappy.
Yeah, there was a cheetah. There's a cheetah character as well that was being developed,
Oh.
and and that one never saw the light of day, but I got to see the character mock-ups and stuff like that, which was pretty cool. And then kind of like a what's the best way to describe it? It was like a cheetah that used a bow staff that used their mobility and stuff like that, which is pretty
Oh,
fun.
that's really cool. Like I'm trying to remember like just the guy from Brawlhalla? I don't remember his name, but he uses a bow staff and stuff like that.
Yeah, almost. They looked straight out of Thundercats. It was really interesting, but really
Mm-hmm.
cool. I really enjoyed the. But again, that kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, whereas like we were so fantastical in our character designs, where
Yeah.
I just remember saying like, can we have like, like some guys and girls and some big blonde buff dude, and like, Thor,
Mm-hmm.
stop it. Like, I'm like, I think it'll sell.
I mean, there was Javash who was I mean almost done to my knowledge. He was the human, I know of that.
Yeah, and it was just so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having these conversations, and I was like, and they're like, "Well, Thor, what do you think?" I was like, "Well, I think we should do some things again where people could like really see
Relate,
this."
yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, "Or we can do Oru, which is a mythical
Oh.
being that plays cards." I was like, "What's happening
yes.
right now? What is going on?"
Our
So-
big orb man. Of course.
I was like, okay, we kind of went the other direction with that and stuff like that. And it was just funny. So, and again, my voice didn't matter so much just because
Mhm.
again, that was more designers and EP
Yeah.
conversations. But I just remember having that dialogue over and over again. So.
Yeah, there's been so much concept art out there of just characters that never got finished that would probably, if Gigantic was still around, there would just probably be so much more concept art as well.
And then it's interesting too because I do know now, looking at the Gigantic characters, where
Mhm.
I can see where certain characters would share the same rig, but I know that would make it so much more expensive to have unique, different
Yeah.
characters. So it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I feel like we
Mhm.
could have definitely padded out the numbers by having a universal rig that could have kind of be flexed in different. Like Fortnite is a great example of that,
Yeah.
where every character
They have like two rigs. They have female and then male.
yeah, and that's important, and I think
Mhm.
we definitely could have done a lot more in making the pipeline easier to create.
Yeah, I think with Gigantic was the problem was there were too many like differentiation of characters. Like you look at Beckett, and then you look at like Rucker or Zenobia, and you could kind of see how those kind of don't fit into the same model rig. Is the problem.
Well, what's really interesting about Gig's character design, and I'm going to be a little bit of an art nerd here for a second, is that they follow a lot of the like main principles of design for animation and like like what you would see in TV or shows. But they kind of fall a little bit flat when it comes to game design and making it easier on like the developers. Like how you said they can't all share a universal rig, but they're still extremely iconic designs with very recognizable silhouettes. And also too, we were talking about how people want to see themselves in these characters, and it's not just that, but they want to be able to idealize themselves with these characters. Like you look at like League of Legends or Overwatch, and a lot of these characters are like fit, hot, sexy man, and you don't really,
Are
the
you saying
closest
you
you
don't
get.
want to cosplay Vadasi? You don't want to be a Vadasi out there with the multiple lock?
Of course I would. A peak of beauty right there. But you see a lot of these designs, and they're like attractive and like but still relatable at the same time. And that's kind of something that Gig didn't really do, because it wanted more iconic sort of like mascot almost type designs. But it's definitely interesting because they're still extremely well made designs, just maybe not what they should have been for the game that they were trying to make.
I can agree with that for sure.
I feel like I've heard this a lot, but a lot of people have said that Gigantic was just made by a bunch of artists. Would you say that is?
So I can Joe Pickup, great, amazing artist, just absolutely so freaking talented. I remember him screaming in playtests, and his voice was very loud and very opinionated, and you know what? That's awesome. That's great, and I love it. I truly thought Joe Pickup was kind of the person. So when people say, "Oh, did artists have like a say or a pool?" And I know he was very close friends with James Finney. And again, I can't speak to whether that's true or not. But if you say that, and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I could see a world where that could be true. And so yeah, that's actually really interesting. I've never. And again, it's hard because I've learned so much now that I have to like teleport myself back in time and like look at around me almost and be like, okay, why were these decisions made? Were they the right decisions? And would I agree with those decisions knowing what I know now? And so yeah, I could whether or not that's true, I could see a world where that could be true for sure.
Exactly. This is kind of an obscure question, but do you know about the little Mozu drawings on the different maps?
Ooh. Really what I know about Mozu was laid down to Mozo turned into Mozu, and that was a whole shenanigans. That was so we printed out like 1,000 posters of Mozo, and then then it changed into Mozu, and I absolutely love that character. Do not know about the Easter eggs of Mozu though.
Yeah, so on Reef and Canyon and what is the code name for Sirens? I don't know off the top of my head, but
Valley, I think.
Valley and Canyon both have little Easter eggs of Mozu. One on the front door of Sea Point post Clash, and then for Canyon on the side of E Point, the wall outside of the map.
That's some good stuff. That is some great stuff. Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm a big fan of the Easter eggs. And, we usually I've come into realm,
the Paco popsicles as well on Sirens.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. I do know that one.
There's so much personality in like the little things.
Exactly.
I love seeing like I believe, isn't it Griselma? She has like a house on
She does have a house on Ember.
Yeah, on Ember Grove. Or like Gnosis' little camp in Ghost Reef. Just like little tiny things like that where it's like, oh my god, there's so much personality and character to this game, and just so many little details that they cared about. So neat.
It really was. It really was. It's funny. I played the majority of my games on Canyon, and we play tested every single day, and it was just Canyon, and we sometimes do Valley, but it's just so funny because we were trying to get the balance right. I don't think we ever did. Like I don't think we ever like nailed it, and I don't think any live service game really says, "Oh, we're done with balance. We're done. We're good." But it's just so funny. Like I just have flashbacks of like hundreds of games with in Canyon.
Yeah, it's definitely the most played map still in the private server community, which is really funny. Probably because it's just so close combat. Yeah, quite a small map. So
it's also a very beginner-friendly map as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because you have to focus a little. Well, also too, they do this unique thing in the private server community on Canyon specifically, where the only creatures that you can summon are bloomers. Which makes it a lot more beginner friendly because they can kind of run back and get health whenever.
Makes sense.
but it also makes it very high combat. Everyone is constantly fighting.
That's interesting. Yeah, and again, I won't say whether it shouldn't have been. If I had to go back in time, I would have loved to see a gigantic where you couldn't actually customize what points get what creatures, and I don't know if that complexity would have been better somewhere else versus because so many times I just see the fights and the anger and people being like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe you summoned this thing there, and you just pointed out a great, oh, we have a rule on this game mode where you can only summon bloomers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is so interesting, and I think that is there's a nugget there where I wish in another world I could have followed that thread down for sure.
Yeah, and it's not like a set rule or anything. It's just kind of like a gentleman's almost, where it's like if the only thing you're supposed to summon is bloomers. It does get changed from time to time depending on who's in the lobby. If there's more experienced players, we'll generally kind of ditch that and play how the game is normally played, or play on a different map entirely. But usually when it's a lot of beginner players, the private servers, we like to stay on Canyon with the all bloomers. Just so it's a little bit more friendly and easier to learn for them.
Makes sense.
Which kind of makes me wonder what would happen if there was like just kind of a brawl sort of game mode.
Yeah.
Which would make it easier to learn characters.
I'll tell you what though, like the gigantic Sanctum Falls and the ability of what they were able to do in Unreal 3 with the water rising, the level, like all of that was industry like pushing at that time. And really, I just look at Sanctum Falls and I'm like, man, this is beautiful. You absolutely nailed it, and just have so much respect for that kind of stuff. And again, the changing of the level, the crescendo, all that kind of stuff was just really kind of near and dear to my heart. It's just awesome game design.
So yeah, speaking of like game design and stuff like that, when I interviewed SoFetch for the first time, he was talking about how the dev team was like made up of all these people who like at that time were probably like the best in the industry. Do you think you would agree with that?
Yes and no. This might be a little controversial. I feel like some people didn't pull their weight, and I know that's kind of like horrible to say. Where I think there's a lot of rock stars at Motiga, a lot of rock stars, amazing people who I still think to this day. I have a very cynical look when it comes to like game industry. I think there's a lot of like I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of bad mistakes in my game industry. I feel like there's a lot of dumb people in the video game industry. I hate to say it. And I mean that in a way where it's like, why are you here? You're just bringing everything down.
Yeah.
And Gigantic was not immune to that, and Motiga was not immune to that. Having said that, there is to this day I feel like there's people on that team back then who I would still look up to today, and that has lasted the test of time, I suppose. And so yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And I think that is, if you look at who is in that picture and look at where they are today, I think you can see the people who have kept continuously risen, and then see the other people where they are now. I think that's a good indicator of people's ability, right? So I look at that, and David Reed, who is in the exact middle next to James Finney and Chris Chung, he does Dead by Daylight stuff, absolutely killing it in the industry. And I just did Nicolas Cage, and like, no, I don't think anybody here would say Dead by Daylight is a failure by any sense of the imagination. And I see other people like Caitlin Pitstick went to go do Gearbox and Tina's Wonderland, like absolutely destroying it over there. And I think you look at a lot of these people and you see where they ended up, and I think that just speaks to their caliber of the person they are for sure. Where maybe other people didn't reach, maybe.
And I feel like there's probably people like that in pretty much any industry where you just kind of look at it and you're like, why? How did you get here?
Did you lie on your resume?
Yeah, no, 10,000%. Yeah.
I definitely feel that way with because I in high school did a lot of like art stuff and like was in like advanced classes for my art and stuff like that. And I looked around at some of my classmates a lot of the time and I was like, what is happening? How did we get here?
And I'm sure people felt that about me back then, right? For sure. So I get it. I totally get it for sure.
Yeah. But you've found your footing, so to speak, and you've moved on in the industry, and you've accomplished quite a lot. And there's definitely something to be said about that.
I appreciate that. I do. Yeah, trying to make people happy. It's not you're not going to make everybody happy, and
Yeah.
I wish I lived in a perfect world. And again, I love seeing people spend time out of the day doing gigantic heaven and just queuing, like you mentioned, for 24 minutes, and that makes my
Mhm.
heart happy knowing that people are trying to keep that vision and that piece of art alive. I hate it that we can't just hit a button and play gigantic, and
Yeah.
people and lawyers and all that kind of stuff want to stick their fingers in
Grr,
everything.
I
Yeah.
hate the law.
Yeah, and I get it. There's a time and place, but man, just
Hmm.
the fact that like we have to fight in order to like go behind people's backs to play this work of art. Who, if you ask anybody from the original team, they're like, "Oh, we love Gigantic. Like this is something we gave our hearts and
Yeah,
souls
this
on." For
isn't like in a perfect world, this isn't what the developers wanted, I
oh,
feel.
absolutely,
Yeah.
no, yeah, no way.
And it is definitely
And
a
no, yeah.
shame. And like in the private server community as well, we really have to like tiptoe around like
Yeah.
the legal things, and like in Gig Heaven, it's like you can't distribute, anything related to the build, you can't upload anything. So we kind of that's kind of why we have the podcast, is because it's kind of a way to like be able to share this game and still talk about it without breaking the law
Hmm.
Makes sense.
and
Makes
making
sense.
people angry.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I've made sure that I've asked so much about this. It was like, am I breaking any NDAs here, or am I good? Yeah.
Yeah, I saw there was a ruling. Reminded me to think about Gigantic. Like a year ago, it's
Hmm.
like, oh, the rule, court of law, says that any NDA that's like kind of lapsed or whatever, you shouldn't be afraid. Like, I remember seeing that where everybody's
Yeah.
like, cool, I can now talk about my NDA 20 years ago where this person did this, and I'm like, oh,
Let's
that's
go.
Gigantic in a way.
I don't know like if we've ever. I know Sofetch has said like the NDA is indefinite, but I I I thought it like lasted only like 10 years or so.
That's what I thought.
But
Yeah, it's like
you
coming
you
up
never
on-
you never know with these kind of things is the problem.
Yeah.
And we have seen a couple of times where people have broken the rules. Like, there's been a couple incidents where we've seen people just like straight up live streaming the leaked build that totally does not exist. Legal people, don't come after me. There is no leaked build. What am I talking about?
Never.
But that has happened a couple of times, and like immediately Gig Heaven is like, no, stop that, take it
Because
down.
the thing is, like, it is like the invite link isn't necessarily public, but you can get the invite link from like the bot in the server, and it's also public on like the Reddit and such.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's like a little bit of leeway with that, but it's also the fact that there is perfect world posts. There are perfect world employees still in the server and Exmotegans, so that is like still kind of the issue with this whole game thing, is that cannot like just express like how you kind of feel for this game, because there's a lot of restrictions, and it really sucks about this whole thing.
Yeah. I wonder what Perfect World's doing these days. I know they released that amazing game, Remnant from the Ashes.
Remnant from the Ashes. I'm pretty sure Atmosphere also worked on that, to my knowledge. A smaller game company. I think Perfect World. I think they got acquired by Gearbox. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I see Gearbox underneath
Mhm.
the arc launcher. Oh my
Yeah.
god, what's happening? It's just so interesting. Now Gearbox, but isn't it a cruel twist of fate that Gearbox, who made Battleborn, which was one of Gigantic's like,
Mhm.
competitors, now they own both. And I would love to see a world where somebody
Yeah.
I would love to see a world where somebody creates a game that has characters from every dead game and do like a
Mhm.
PvP game. That'd be so fun.
That would be amazing.
Oh, you got Gigantic, Battleborn, Hyperscape, all the games that have died in the last 10 years.
Exactly. It's really just because of like I mean, there's a ton of reasons why games cannot be kept alive. I think one of the main reasons is definitely like just servers and not being able to have the money to keep them open. I think
That
that's
is-
one of the reasons Hyperscapes died as well. Because I could be wrong.
I know personally, like
Mhm.
people think of like, oh, and again, server costs can be broken down in a lot of like different things,
Yeah.
like INAPs and stuff like that. But like, oh, it's $1,000, no, and they're like 5,000, like no, like 10,000, no, keep going, and it's so on.
Yeah.
That's why it's funny where people are like, oh, I'll just like it has to be a good server, has to have a server that has protection.
Exactly.
The last thing you want to do is have a server that has like fail safes, and then and suddenly I have all of your personal information and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's just like at the end of Gigantic when it shut down, it's just there weren't as much players as like I guess they were hoping for, to my knowledge at least, so there just wasn't enough players to like keep funding the server, and they just weren't making a lot of money because of the monetization problems. Because I know that you could buy skins, like you could buy premium coins and stuff like that. And you can also there was the free currency where you could also get the skins as well.
Yeah, there's something I've learned from like Apex, or even I don't know if you heard of the game Farlight 84 came out recently,
Mm-hmm.
but MTX is a very crucial and almost so Apex, you can buy like 3 points, 4 points, 5 points of monetization per character.
Yeah.
Fortnite, same thing, right? You can buy gliders, you can buy there's so many points of monetization where, again, Gigantic, you had a skin. That's all they could do.
Yeah, that's
and then
it.
you could, and then I know weapon skins were talked about and all that kind of stuff, but you need to be able to like monetize your game in a world where
Mm-hmm.
both the player is excited and incentivized and saying, "Hey, this feels great," without the player feeling like, oh, this is unfair, or this is not cool,
Exactly.
and it's such a hard line to do. But games have shown that they can do it. But it's a pivotal role because you have to make money. God, you have to make money.
You
And,
like yeah, you have to either make your game not free to play and have like a lot of in-app purchases, or make the game somewhat cost money. I think is the problem.
yeah, for sure. And Farlight 84 did a good job. It was a
Mm-hmm.
mobile game for 2 years now, just released on PC. And there is a lot of MTX in there that makes sense. So I just knowing what I know now, if I could go back, I would definitely try to say, okay, what can we monetize here that is not a pain point to the player, but gets the player excited. Like
Yeah.
every time you log in, there's something flashing in your face. You've unlocked this, you've done this, 10 more
Mm-hmm.
games and you do this. Like, oh, cool. Becca's got a new backpack, a new jetpack if you do this. And that's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that gets players onto that wheel.
Mm-hmm. Like I think the
That's
only thing that was like kind of like that was like the fortune cards and stuff like that.
yeah,
Really.
which yeah, and I have a very I know remember the fortune cards, but the fact that I can't be like, oh, cool, this is what that means, I think is pretty telling.
Mm-hmm.
In the
Yeah.
sense of like this is how the game made their money because of the fortune cards. No, that's not what that meant at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, if I feel like if they had more monetization, because I know there were the game editions that some people did buy that like gave you exclusive skins and stuff like that. There just wasn't enough to like keep the game alive per se.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to game design as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like what could we would have added to make more monetization hooks? Is you jump off the sky,
Airship?
yes, the airship, and you don't have trails. Like, could we add trails to there? Maybe. Did that make sense? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's stuff like that where like, how can banners around the map, accolades, all that.
Could
kind of
add
stuff.
like like when you're loading into the game, there's like that whole like the characters could add actual banners to that, banners on like the scoreboard. There was a lot of stuff that could have been done that I just don't think people were thinking about at that time. Because
Yeah,
now we have
maybe.
like games like Overwatch and like um, Paladins and what's the other Valorant that have like banners and stuff that display like in game and like borders for like your level or like certain battle passes and like titles and all that.
Yes. And maybe that plays back into the conversation. Was it artists that had more of a say? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But again, knowing what I know now and coming back in time, I just wish I could have been there to been like, hey, we need to think about this stuff because this
Yeah.
is this is what makes the money. This is what we have to do in order to keep those boots on the ground for sure.
Right, and I'm sure it was also a matter of like the crunch that everyone was already under, trying to get everything compatible for Xbox and Windows 10 and Arc, and all that the disaster that was. So trying to think about ways to monetize as well was also kind of a struggle. I'm sure, just balancing everything. Um,
Yeah.
so I can definitely see why that would have been difficult, but uh, I do appreciate though at the same time that they didn't go as hard on the monetization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that being free to play as well was also one of the things that gave Gigantic its player base, however small it may have been, because I can definitely recount many times I've seen in Gigantic Heaven where people have talked about how they found the game, and it was exactly how I did, looking through the Xbox store and finding a free game that was kind of neat.
For sure. The amount of free games have just absolutely skyrocketed. I saw something along the lines of like back in 2015, there was, I think, 20 titles that were free to play. Now it's over like 300, 400.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely 100% agree with you there. Also, I don't think there's a world here where it comes out for a boxed price that can compete with other free-to-play games, which is something that is
Yeah.
very telling. And so when you can go to another experience, and it's not going to be the same experience, but instead of dropping 20, 25, 30, 40, you're going to be able to like just play a good game for free. So, for sure.
Yeah, and also too, you were talking about how the monetization stuff. It's you like earning things as well. I think that's another part of player retention. Is there wasn't
Yes.
really anything that was like keeping you there. There wasn't a ranked mode. There wasn't any like quests or anything to like earn like decorations for your profile or anything like that. So the game was already hard to learn, but you also didn't really feel like you were getting much for sticking around if you did. So I can definitely imagine that player retention would have also been kind of a problem because of that.
Oh, for sure. And whether I'm a big component of your first three or four, three games or so, got to be careful. But being against bots, that way the player kind of gets their feet underneath them, but doing it in a way where people can't say, "Oh, I'm playing against bots right now." And that's super important. I know we never really kind of nailed that. Like you mentioned before, keeping people on that hamster wheel of saying like, I'm logging into Gigantic because I need to complete my quest in order to get this X, Y, Z. That none of that was there, and it should have been there. And
Yeah.
really actionable rewards that you felt good logging in and getting for sure.
And now there's a lot of games like Fortnite is really popular with it, with like battle passes and things like that that keep you logging in. I know for sure that because I play League and I log in every day when the new battle pass comes out. I'm like, I gotta grind some more levels to get the new stuff. And there wasn't any of that in Gigantic either. It didn't really, like you said, keep you on that hamster wheel. And maybe that's because it just wasn't as popular, battle passes and things like that. Just maybe not that format, or if it just wasn't something that was really on their mind with everything else going on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd probably lean to the last one there. And again, most of the team after 2015, going into 2016, there was layoffs. There was like it's hard, right? Because it was, you look at that picture and you see a lot of great people there, but after the layoffs, you split that picture in half, right? Because the publishing team got laid off at the end of
Exactly.
2015. And so then you have people working on the game and wearing multiple hats. It's just so hard. And battle passes are expensive to make and to monetize, and then to make sure all the data hook up, and all the rows, and you
Just
last
wasn't
thing,
enough time, it seemed like.
yeah, no, for sure, yeah, yeah. But what came out was a great game, and I just wish we were having the conversation of what is Gigantic 2. And so, having said that, Gigantic will always and forever hold a very special place in my heart.
Yeah.
I love it. I truly do. I'm blessed that I was able to go on that crazy ride, meet those crazy people, and I look back fondly. I've had some ups and downs in the video game industry, like everybody else has. Gigantic, in a lot of ways, was the best start I could have ever hoped for, and so great times.
Well, I think unless you have any more questions or anything to discuss, I think we can leave it right there.
I just hope there's a world one day where we'll see these characters once again. I hope there's a world one day where there's not this fear of a gigantic scythe hanging over us to want to experience art that we've made in the past that had our love. So who knows? I hope that day comes. I'm sad. At the end of the day, I guess I'm just sad because there's going to be a whole story. I don't have the whole entire story. I don't think anybody has the whole entire story. There's so many things that people just don't realize, like UWP and all that kind of stuff. And so there's always going to be a conversation, but that conversation will never be fully complete. And so
exactly,
it makes me a little bit sad. And there's a YouTuber out there that's just like the death of a game and stuff like that. And there's always, and there's some valid things that he says in his death of a game when it's specifically about Gigantic. But there's just so much of that story that will never and can't be told. And so it makes me
only way the conversation can be complete is if you get like 30 of the original devs, and then it will be complete.
For sure.
We're gathering them slowly, like infinity stones.
Yeah, for sure. But what I will say though is, if I left with one thing, is that the team was amazing. It was great. It was just people who are passionate about. I've been in this ecosystem now for about 10 years, and I look back at my time at Gigantic, and I truly see people that I love and cherish, and I know that are going to do amazing things in the industry. So yeah, I guess I'll just leave it on that.
All right. Is there anything you wanted to plug or anything while we're here?
Not particularly. I just hope everybody's safe, happy. The world's
Yeah.
crazy, and I just want people to just take a step back, realize that we have a really well. Like it's just, I remember renting a game from Blockbuster and renting Superman 64 and being like,
Hmm.
this is the worst thing ever. So I'm happy to be in the world I am because there is
Yeah.
so many great games out there. So I just want to say a big thank you to you, Jack and June, for having me on.
Yeah, of
And
course.
Problem.
and if anybody needs me, you can find me, I guess, at ThorDG on Twitter. And just, yeah, just if there's been a person you haven't reached out to a while, just tell them you love them. So that's it.
Great
So,
message. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you for watching a little bit of a hiatus / revamp of the fellas, and we'll see you on the airship.